There are just a few places to jack up an EXP LN7 or any first gen 80s Escort. The first gen meaning any car from 81 through 1990. This will what it imply. So the suspension hasn't really changed from 81 to 90. It's still more or less this up front. You have a control arm going off the unibody, and then going into the side of it you have your sway bar, your anti-roll bar, whatever you'd like to call it. And then on top of the knuckle is a strut, and the knuckle at the bottom connects to our one lone control arm. So you have a few places to jack up on. You can jack up underneath the sway bar where it mounts. You see that? See that U-shaped mounting bracket? You can jack up right on the bottom of that. It's no problem. You can jack up on the hub of the control arm, the larger portion. Get a better angle. You can jack up right underneath the thick part of that. The only issue with that is sometimes, depending on your tire and rim size, you might not be able to fit a jack under that, because your wheel and tire combination could be out to here, and then there's no way you'll ever get decent grip on it. So that leaves one really nice spot that you can jack up from, and it's right here. You can jack up on this ledge. It's reinforced with some rather thick steel, and it has to, just like the control arm, it has to carry a fair bit of weight of the car. So you can jack up on this raised ledge without any issue. The only other place you might want to jack up, you can do it underneath this guy. This is the torsional dampener for the transmission and engine. So normally there'd be a triangle mount here with a ball end, and that ball end goes inside this steel cup. You can jack up on the bottom of it, usually without issue, if you have a two-door Escort or EXP. Not a problem. But jacking up from the underside of the radiator support is a really bad idea. These are pretty weak and frimpy. They're no stronger than the rockers that go down the side of the body. So neither the rockers or the radiator support are something you should jack on ever. Just don't do it, especially if it's turning rusty. You can see mine's getting rusty. These rot out pretty quick. Then you try jacking up on it, you will poke a hole through it. Same story with the rockers. In your manual it says to use the spare jack underneath one of the two ends of the pinch welds. This is the pinch weld, goes down the full length of the rockers. You can see someone's been jacking up on it before. And you can for a little while without issue. However, once this folds flat, you will puncture through the rocker. It is guaranteed. Once this pinch goes flat, you will puncture your rocker. And I can't say that enough times, because even if you don't fold that over flat, you still could puncture your rocker, especially if it's rusting. You'll just poke a hole right frickin' through it. And we go on to the rear. There's a few places you can jack up from back here. The best spot, and bear with me as I get the camera around, is right underneath the control arm. You can see that spring right under there, or the spring's right there on top of the control arm. Well, underneath the control arm, there's a round cup that the spring sits in. That's a perfectly acceptable place to jack up on. And pretty much anything on that control arm you can jack up on. Just be wary, the further in you go further into the car you go, the more you'll jack up the other side too. So if you only want to jack up the left side, keep your jack pad to the left side of the control arm. If you want to jack up the right side, put your jack underneath the right side control arm and get it as close to the tire as possible to jack up only the right. Now, between the two rear control arms, there's usually a plate of aluminum, sometimes steel. See that there? There's a plate right here. When that is straight, sometimes you can jack up on it, but only if you have a two-door. If you have a bubble back EXP, you cannot jack up on that. You weigh too much already. You'll just buckle it. Any four-door Escort or wagon, you try jacking up on that, it'll crumple. Once it crumples, what happens is your jack will go through that. And it may goof up these two mounts on the side. It hasn't to me yet, but I have had these crumple. If it's straight as an arrow, like I said, if you only have a two-door car, you can jack up on it. But it's not quite recommended because it will eventually buckle like that. Once it does, it'll go up, and who knows what it'll change. If your car is rusty on the floor pan, the rear floor pan, because they love to rust in these spare tire wells. If it starts rusting in this area, you could poke a hole in it. And if you've already crumpled that metal support plate, you will poke through that. Keep that in mind. But that's kind of the only few places you can jack up from. They're all readily accessible. Another spot you can try jacking up on these, but you really want to try to avoid that if you can, because jacking up on these when the car is fully loaded, even if it's an EXP or a Escort GT, the two lightest of the cars, it will bend these, and once these bend, they don't work worth a darn. They do funny things. Mine's rusted shut, so it's not going anywhere, but it's real easy to bend these, especially being that they're only mounted to thin body metal. So should you jack up on this with a car that's fully loaded, this right here might remain straight. However, what extends into the car will probably buckle. What will happen is, about a foot in, this spot will go down. It will crumple down, and this over here will crumple up at you because you're prying it, and that's what will happen. Similar things will happen up front, but up front it's just less prone to it because these bumpers are a little bit more integral up front. See that's where they kind of mount at. So they don't really have much of a prying effect up front. However, that being said, it makes it much easier to bend these. Once you bend them, they don't bend back. You can try every trick in the world, they won't bend back. And that's why you should not be stepping on your back bumper. So every time you do that, those bend some and they don't come back. You'll see a lot of EXPs and Escort GTs that have a back bumper that's sagging. It's because people step on them, especially on the EXPs, because with the taillights, they exclude a space like this that's like perfect for your foot. So you step on that, your shock absorbers bend some, and your bumper just sags down like that indefinitely. So just keep that in mind. And of course, don't try jacking up on this trailing link. It will bend like butter, and it doesn't matter how much you reinforce it. It will always bend. And that mounting joint it's attached to, that will usually bend too. Again, that's only body metal sheet steel. So put a jack on that. It will crumple at some point. And then once it crumples, you'll find it poking through the floor. So made it long enough that pretty much covers all the jacking points, so just keep that in mind. This is an 82, so the sway bar mounts are a little different than the 84s on up, but it's relatively the same, and the principles in the warnings still apply. You know, don't go against what I say. You will quite definitely regret it. So say ta-ta for now, everybody.